Boker Tov, pod people. My guest this week is Alon Shtruzman, CEO of Keshet International, now one of the leading independent studios operating in international TV. In many ways, Alon's career mirrors the trajectory of Israeli programming, starting local and then going global. And Alon tells us about those early days in Israel and how Keshet became one of the world's foremost content creators. Enjoy. Hi Alon, welcome to the pod.
Hello, Danny. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
What was TV like in Israel when you were growing up?
TV was relatively, small by size, but still very influential and dominant. Funnily enough, even though I grew up on one channel, but I remember so many of those shows. There are jokes among people, from my generation, because we remember some of the American or British series that aired in Israel. We remember them, as really big scale, because that's all we had. So there's a legendary show called The Time Tunnel, which honestly, I still haven't met the American who actually remembers it, but I do remember it, and maybe also you, because for my generation, it was one of the only American shows we watched in Israel, and it used to be it was airing in loops. So even though there may be I don't know, a handful of episodes and season and only one season, they used to air it so much it's engraved, in my brain as a big show. Or another show was The Lost Islands, also a show that very few Americans remember, but my generation in Israel does. So yeah, I was a TV child, so I remember I used to wake up and say that I'm sick to avoid school, just to be able to watch the morning shows, which, by the way, were completely educational, but still, on television. So yeah, so there was only one channel, governmental, but it was sliced to windows. So there was the educational window in the morning, and then it was the kids after school window, and then it was the teenager window, and then it was all windows. So I remember it as many, many channels, which, by the way, that might be the proof that, sometimes, too much, is less, and less is a lot.
So TV was obviously a passion. I know photography and video arts was something that you studied. And given that there was one channel, how big a leap was it to end up working in television?
My parents, keep showing an essay that I allegedly wrote when I was 10, allegedly, but again, I mean, they're the only witnesses, where I actually say in writing that I'm going to be a TV producer and I'm going to live in LA. So yeah, so I think it was always, kind of something I knew I want to do from a very early age. I went to high school to study TV and film. I was lucky, and in my hometown, even though I grew up, in the 70s and then 80s, I was a teenager in the 80s. In my hometown, there was a school with a TV studio, and you could graduate TV and film. So I did it, So I finished high school with a short film, like a student. So I don't think no one, including me, was surprised when I ended up doing it. It was pretty much, it was the only thing I have ever wanted to do, and honestly, the only thing I've done in my life. That's the only job I know is TV and film.
So by that stage, commercial TV had launched, and also there was cable as well. And I think you started out on the creative side of the business at the Israeli cable operation, ICP. What were your first responsibilities?
Well, I was in charge for the archive. So I started to work for the Israeli cable when I was literally just about, to leave the army. I was in my in the last few weeks of my army service. I was already on my final discharge holiday, and somehow through connections, I managed to land that job. with the Israeli cable company. There was, back then, Israel had 5 different local cable companies, even though it's so small. Someone in the government thought it's a good idea to divide, the country to so many cable companies. Each one of them had like a neighborhood, but they did set up a consortium, like a partnership between all the cable companies in order to buy content and set up the channels and produce the shows. So I landed a job at that company, and I was in charge for the archive, which lasted only a few months, but that was my very glorious few first steps. But then, since I was, film studies weren't so popular then as it is now. And I happen to know how to produce and direct and edit and shoot because I did it in high school. So at some point they told me, you know how to produce television, no? So yeah, you should just leave the archive. You should come in and start producing shows. That was these were very entrepreneurial days. Everyone who was around and knew how to do something in the TV space, was recruited. So that's how I started.
But a very dynamic time, right? I mean, there was cable and then satellite
absolutely.
Platform.
Yeah. You used to come and have fun, if I remember, playing between the cable and the satellite. I have some recollection of you in Tel Aviv, and then me coming to London to negotiate the deals. But yeah, I mean, these were very dynamic times. And yeah, I mean, it's funny because now we're all very busy exporting. Then, we're fighting between us on importing, and literally, there was a time when, there was a bloody battle between Yes and Hot over the big American shows. So, time has absolutely changed since then.
And then you had your first international role with Fox International Channels. Was that a big life change?
That was a massive life change. It was my first job overseas, and obviously it's a life change, not only in terms of the job, but also in terms of life. Suddenly I was an expat living in a foreign country, and the first one was Italy. So not no one, but most people, around me in Europe didn't speak, English, and obviously it made everything more complicated. So yeah, it was a massive life change. I mean, that was obviously my first experience, working outside of Israel, and evidently I liked it and stayed. I left Israel for the Fox job. When was that? Almost 15 years ago, and I still live abroad. So all in all, it was a good move. But yeah, everything was different, and for the first time, I tasted how it looks like, inside a big global company. I always looked at these companies, the big major American studios from the outside, and it seemed like, the big mighty Americans. But it's the first time, for me to have like a real insight how it looks like from the inside, and it was absolutely an amazing school for business and work culture. And I'm very grateful for those 2 years at Fox, because I mean that was absolutely my crash course in global business, especially as I went to work for FIC, Fox International, which was a very entrepreneurial division inside Fox that was tasked in taking the Fox content and channels outside of the US. So that was a real lesson, in like a good class, on business. Not, I mean, everywhere. I mean, I worked with Asia and Latin America and obviously Europe. So that was really an amazing experience, and I'm so grateful to that time.
And then in 2012, you became CEO of Keshet International. What was the vision for KI at that point? And was it very daunting to be given the task of building this Israeli-led business in the international arena?
It was absolutely fun. I think that, being kind of, the frontman of your home country when it comes to any kind of culture, especially TV shows, which is my specialty. That was for me more than just, doing business. It was a correction, because I grew up in the Israeli industry, and for so many years, we kept saying, hey, we do great stuff, what a shame we taught in English. Even when we sold in treatment to HBO, it was still, more of a phenomena than a trend. even though here and there, I mean, there were a few examples of Israeli shows or Israeli movies that made it outside of Israel. It was still, pretty much, it was something in the horizon for us. It was somewhere over the rainbow. For us, TV is in Hebrew and the market is Israeli, and that's it. I mean, we'll never have the prospect and distribution and the audience of American and English shows. Or even, Spanish-speaking shows. So that was kind of, almost a trauma, for me, growing up in the industry that was in one hand so prolific and creative, on the other hand, operated in such a small market. So for me, this endless opportunities that we suddenly had for Israeli content was amazing. It was absolutely more than just, work. It was absolutely something, very, very deep and accomplishing for me to see, the Israeli shows, getting picked up and getting remade. And, suddenly, Israel became, such a big player in Hollywood and not only in the global industry. So the vision for me, I grew up on the legacy of the American studios. I grew up, on the almightiness of the American major studios. So obviously, for me, that was the aspiration. That was what I wanted KI to be. And we used to say that if there's the major American studios and then there's the indie studios, Fremantle, Bunny, J. Shine, now all of them are the same studios, but they used to be the indie studios. So we will be the startup studio. So we'll bring, startup mentality, which is so Israeli and obviously inherited from the legacy of the Israeli high tech. We'll bring, the culture of startups to the studio structure. And we did it. I think that KI, which is now a studio, absolutely a studio, but KI is a startup studio. We're humble and we still try to keep it lean and mean. Maybe that's what helped us, also to go through the COVID relatively, successfully. So it's always been to be a studio, and I'm happy that mission accomplished, and we are a studio.
And in terms of the scope of the business, it's both scripted and non-scripted. It's multiple territory based.
It's a bit different in the US and in the UK. If you look at that, we had a few JVs in the US and we still do unscripted, but the majority of what we do in the US is scripted. Last week, our latest show got picked up for second season, La Brea. So it's a very festive week for us in Keshet US. But the business in the US is very much scripted focused, whether it's network or non-network. While in the UK it's much more unscripted focused. I think it's part of some kind of natural inertia. In the US, we signed the deal with NBC, which is it's only scripted. So in a way that kind of focused us in the US on the scripted side, while in the UK, we're not committed to any big studio buyer, and we did a few moves with Greenbird that made us a pretty big player in the UK market. So it's kind of so that's the way the business shaped up. Also in Germany, we acquired Trezor, which was mainly known for as an unscripted company. And we built a successful scripted division, which had a couple of already aired TV shows, and few other in the making. I would say that in the US, the scripted business is so big that it kind of sucks in everything. Those productions are so big and so demanding that as a boutique business, it hardly leaves any resources to do some other stuff. In the UK, the business is structured by independent producers, each one of them with his own slate or her own slate. So yes, so they do much more unscripted. In the US, it's like big scripted shows that sucks in endless amount of attention and financing.
And of course, this is all in a way underpinned, or certainly has a background in the Israeli market by having a base of an Israeli broadcaster.
That's our main differentiation. Even though many of our successful current shows are, not really Israeli. La Brea that got picked up for second season, is completely original. But still, yes, absolutely. I mean, I would say that our main differentiation is that, we are Israelis and, we're so rooted in the Israeli market, and we have access to the best of the Israeli writers, and obviously the Israeli network, which is a great incubator for content.
And just on a personal level, how's it been moving to LA? I mean, Rome was challenging from a language point of view in the first trip, but how were you received as an Israeli TV executive moving to the home of TV?
Specifically, LA is very easy and friendly for Israelis and Jews because there are so many of them. It's a city with a few hundred of thousands of Israelis. Many of them came already in the 70s. So culturally, it's a very easy place. And again, I luckily, I moved here, with a job. I didn't need to knock on doors and, try to find myself. I came to build something.
You mentioned In Treatment, and then I suppose in a way, Homeland may have also been a bit of a turning point.
Yeah, Homeland was absolutely a big turning point. It was it was the first real big international success. Homeland was a big hit in America, in the UK, and in many other countries. And it brought Avenir, my boss who runs the group, it brought him an Emmy and a Golden Globe. So Homeland, was a game changer for us. Also a long running show, 8 seasons, which means that the success was kind of spread over a long period of time. Homeland was success, both for the Israeli show that was sold as tape in more than 80 countries, the Gidi Raf show, Prisoners of War, and was made in different languages, including even in India. There was an amazing award-winning version of POW, Prisoner of War, in India, and of course the American success, which made it a legend. Homeland is one of those shows that will never disappear. You can always watch it, on streaming, and I think that the cultural influence of Homeland, will stay with us for a long time. Now people are asking us, about what about the prequel to Homeland? Prequels became so trendy recently. So what about the life? What happened before the show? The story of Carrie before the show. But yeah, absolutely. As a brand, Homeland will always stay with us, and that was a massive game changer for Keshet.
So Keshet has been very successful in producing for US network TV, particularly NBC. I guess you mentioned earlier the NBC relationship. I think a lot of independent producers have found themselves going a bit more down the streaming route because of the vertically integrated nature of the studios that rely very much on their own in-house production arms. How were you able to navigate the network world, both in terms of creative development and also one of the thorny issues, which is retaining international rights for your wonderful sales team?
Every model is by itself. Every model, obviously, there's a price, for everything, and we're getting used to sell more rights, but for more money. Also, there's no one model, and I'm sure that in the future we see even more different models, and that's the way it is. The industry is much more diverse. There are much more buyers. Different buyers have different models. And as a sales company, we find ourselves, flexible and working with our partners and buyers to find, a model that would work for both of us. It's not always simple, but it's doable.
And how do you see the US network business going forwards? Because the demise of linear TV is talked about a lot, but these are still massive businesses. Do you see them on a similar path to the way they are now? Are they going to change? Are they going to focus on certain genres because that suits live viewing?
They still make massive money. So, I think we're seeing a segmentation. The business is growing and getting more segmented. So, there are more segments of business. When MTV started, in the 80s, there was that song, the video, Kills the Radio Star. The radio star never died. The radio star found his own niche. Cinemas, even after COVID, I went to see a movie on Saturday, and I was happy. I was happy to to walk into a pretty crowded cinema. So that was nice. And also networks. We have a show on NBC, and enough millions of people come to see it in real time to make the airtime lucrative for advertising. And it's a great business. It might be shrinking, but it's absolutely not dying. Most major media groups, they have everything. They have production, and they have linear, and they have on demand, and they have a streamer service, and NBC and Peacock are becoming one. Same way as ABC and the Disney channels are becoming one with FX, and with FX, Hulu, and Disney Plus. Warner Brother, and HBO Max. So yes, I think I don't think linear TV will die. If anything, on the contrary, I think it will have a comeback at some point. People get tired with everything when it's too much, and at some point, people will miss, the notion of a lineup of a playlist. Amazon launched a linear channel, IMDb. Netflix launched in France a linear channel. So linear is not dead. It just changing shape, scale, business models. But I absolutely think that the network business is here to stay, with obviously the right adjustments.
Looking back, what would you pick as a career highlight?
Honestly, I'm not trying to push the question, but there are so many highlights. I'm lucky enough to work in the business, which is a never-ending grind. So obviously, launching the Israeli video on demand in the early 2000s was a highlight. Selling Rising Star in dozens of countries was a highlight. Being, hands-on producer for American shows like I did Boom for Fox, and Rising Star for ABC. That was a highlight. Getting a second season for La Brea is absolutely a highlight. So there are many small and big highlights that together make life.
Well, this is the part of the podcast where I ask my guests for their lockdown film, book, music choice, and box set. So choosing one from each, what would you choose if there was a future lockdown, or we find ourselves in similarly constrained circumstances?
So in terms of books, there's one book I read and immediately tried to get a rise, but it was already off the market. An amazing book, which I read during the quarantine, and I keep recommending everyone to read. It's the Jewish version of Sins of a Marriage. It's called Fleischman is in Trouble, and I know that FX is already making it. But it's an amazing divorce story in a Jewish family in the Upper East Side. That's on the book side. On the series side, it's actually a British one. It's a Sin. I loved It's a Sin. Russell T. Davies, the genius Russell T. Davies, an amazing and very brave commission for Channel 4. One of the best series I've ever watched, and absolutely, one of the peak moments of. For me, of 2020. Films, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, Nagisa Oshima, 1983, David Bowie and Yoshi Sakamoto. Remember the movie?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I went to see Dune on Saturday. Even though it's for free on HBO Max, I still went to see it on the cinema for the big screen.
And music choice, an album, a playlist.
I want to praise an album that actually came came only recently. It's the Lockdown Sessions by Elton John. He's doing duets with Dua Lipa and Little Nas X. Absolutely a great, and I'm not a big fan of Elton John, but that's a great product of the Lockdown. Great collaboration.
Very good. Well, Alon Shtruzman, thank you so much for being a guest on the pod. It's been fascinating.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And we'll look forward to more season pickups and more great TV in the future.
Good to see you, Danny. Hope to see you soon, in the small lanes of Cannes or London.